This is Deanna Minich, and we are here to talk about a very exciting topic. Nutritional detoxification through food is going to be our focus this evening, and we are doing this. It's actually Harmony Hill Retreat Center is sponsoring this webinar and offering it to the public for free. So after it's been recorded, feel free to listen to it again and to give it to your friends and family. This is truly an incredible topic because our planet is becoming more toxic and our bodies can only take in so much in the way of toxins. And there are a variety of different ways that we can deal with that. And our bodies have innate processes that allow them to just get these toxins eliminated from us. There could be some other things that could facilitate that, some things through food. So that's going to be our focus. Now, some of you may have seen that I was showing that there's going to be a free virtual summit on this topic, just on detox, all the different aspects, toxic food, toxic water, toxic emotions, toxic people in our lives, toxic homes. So there will be 30 well-known experts in the field of detox teaching you on all these specific elements, and it's free. You sign up, we make sure you have your name, and then we send you the information for when it starts. It's going to start in August, but I would say it's good to sign up now and get your name on the list so that we have you involved in that. All right, so keep in mind that as we go through this information, there's going to be a lot. You know that my tendency, in case you've ever been on any of my webinars before, my tendency is to have a lot of information. I almost hope that I'm not inundating, that I am informing. But really what you want to do is take this in the spirit of education. So this is not prescriptive. This is not telling you that you need to do these things. I really do think because detoxification is such an intensive area of focus that it's best to work with a skilled clinician in this area. So a naturopathic physician typically have excellent training to really take you through, and some medical doctors have this training as well. So let me the high-level view here of what we're going to be focused on. So we're going to talk about how detoxification is important in cancer prevention, talk a bit about that because, you know, really and truly, if our focus is cancer, and with the Harmony Hill emphasis on that, we're really focused on how we can prevent and even thinking about during treatment of cancer, the role of toxins in the progression of cancer. So really important, and in fact, is cancer on the rise, especially certain cancers, neurological cancers, because of the toxins that we have in our environment? That question has been posed. Talk about the 5 main body organs to focus on when it comes to keeping clean. So, you know, detox can go all over the place, and what we want to focus on are the 5 main body organs, what you can do within those organs. And there's kind of a system as to how you do that exactly, so we're going to talk about that. And as part of talking about those 5 organs, we're going to be talking about how to keep them well-functioning, how to keep them optimal in a way of doing their job of excreting these toxins. So the books I like to recommend is one by a friend of mine, Dr. Lisa Altshuler. Dr. Altshuler had cancer herself and went through the process of finding what worked for her. And she wrote this book, a very excellent book called 5 to Thrive, talking about the 5 different aspects of helping to transform your internal landscape. And one of the pathways that she talked about was digestion and detoxification and how important these are in the way of cancer prevention. Of course, talks about the immune system, inflammation, hormones, insulin resistance, but she gives quite a lot of attention on this area of detoxification. So why even focused on this? Doesn't it seem like a misnomer to be talking about detoxification in a more nutritional sense? Usually when we think of detox, we think of drug or alcohol elimination from the body. Well, this term has been extrapolated into our everyday lives now. We definitely live in a toxic world. I don't know if you remember the book that came out by Rachel Carson titled Silent Spring. talk about the levels of pesticides in the environment and changes in bird populations. So with that awareness that started in the 1960s, there's been increasing vigilance about how toxic the planet is, all levels of toxicity. So I don't think we can re-escape it because we all have to eat, and there are a lot of toxic foods available at the market, and we don't even know that we're eating toxins. That's kind of the downside. We don't know. We can't see pesticides, insecticides, herbicides. We don't know that we're taking in bovine growth hormone or antibiotics through dairy and milk products. So a lot of the toxicity is insidious. We don't know it's there, but we definitely can sense that we have some changes in our body, in our physiology. Not only food, sometimes, because I'm a nutritionist, I focus on food. There's a lot there in the way of toxicity. But what we're now finding out is that it's not just food, not just water, but the things that we're putting on our skin. Our skin is one of the most absorptive surfaces of the body. We absorb a lot through our skin. And in a book entitled Slow Death by Rubber Duck, I had this very interesting quote that by the time the average woman grabs her morning coffee, she applied 126 different chemicals in 12 different products to her face, body, and hair. Now that's a lot of toxic ingestion before we even got our day going. So that's pretty, I would say that's just the start of it, right? And if we look at men say, well, that's not me. I'm not using all those personal care products. Well, men take in a number of different products at the start of their day, not 12, but they typically use about 6 to 8 different personal care products. You have to think broadly: deodorant, soap, lotion, shampoo, conditioner, all these things that we might take in, the things that we put in our hair. So all of that contains some level of toxins as well, parabens, phthalates. We even get gluten in our shampoos and soaps and lotions. Gluten, I'm sure you've heard a lot about, and you're probably thinking, why is she mentioning that as a toxin? Well, for some people, it is a toxin. For people that are gluten intolerant, for people that have celiac disease, that's truly a no-no. You can't have any level of gluten if you have celiac disease. So it's worthwhile to spend the time to understand a bit about the products. So truly, we are what we are taking in from the environment. And what we take in from the environment manifests in the way of our function, how we think, what we're doing, our activities through the day, how we breathe, what we're breathing in. And so it's this relationship that we have between the body and the environment. And sometimes the environmental stressors that we're taking in are really impact our health. So to be going through the airport, one airport in particular, I think I was going through Boston, and had to stop in one of the mainstream stores, one of the little stores where you can buy magazines and food, and just happened to be walking past the magazine rack, and I saw these articles, right, the covers of these magazines. So looking at, sugar kills, right? Look at the strong statement on the cover of this magazine. And then on the other one, toxic. Millions of Americans get sick from eating food that inspectors say is safe. So we're surrounded, and there is definitely awareness of toxins. I guess the question is, how do we not become overwhelmed? How do we take this in the spirit of knowledge and information and turn it into action rather than fear? Well, I do think it's important for you to have some of these facts. So I'll go a little bit deeper into understanding the level of toxicity we have and how it relates to different health conditions, and then we're going to get into the organs. So what I thought, one great website, if you want to know more about toxins and different toxic products, go to the Environmental Working Group site, ewg.org. You might make a note of that. Excellent site, lots of information. They've really got the pulse on toxic products, foods, drink, water, personal care products, etc. They reported on a study showing that in 10 babies, they found up to 232 toxic chemicals in the umbilical cord blood of these babies. And so the idea here is that nobody is really protected from toxicity. It starts before birth. It starts in utero. So would it be a good idea for a woman who is thinking about conceiving to start to examine some of the detoxification processes that are going on for her? Does she have increased toxins? Yes, because much of that will be transferred to the fetus, to the baby ultimately. And keep in mind that a lot of these toxins love fat, love to sink into fat. So what happens is that the more fat we have, the more potential we have to accumulate these toxins. And babies tend to be a bit more fat relative to muscle when they're born. That's just the natural state. And so they might tend to accumulate more. Now keep that in mind because we are going to talk about weight loss and what happens there. Then if I asked you all, what are some sources of toxicity, you could name a number of different things. Think about your house, all the things that you're exposed to, paint on your walls, the carpet on the floor, the laminate if you have that, or wood floors, the water that you're drinking, the food that's in your refrigerator and in your cabinets, household cleaners. Maybe some of you clean houses or have your house cleaned or you clean yourself. Think of all that exposure and how often is that happening? You live in a city, you have exposure to a lot of auto exhaust and a lot of pollution. It's very interesting what I'm seeing in the science about air pollution being correlated to increased cardiovascular disease. Would you have ever thought that pollution tied into heart disease? Well, probably it seems intuitive, but now we're seeing the science. If you live in the country or in more rural areas, you're not protected either. Think of all of the crops and all the agriculture around that requires things like pesticides, insecticides, herbicides in order to make for more robust crops. And live in the country, chances are you might have to have some type of pesticide control for your house. So really and truly, we are exposed at all ends. We can't kind of ourselves up somewhere and think that we're protected because probably even there we would be exposed. Now you care. Why do you care as it relates to health? What we see is that this term for toxins that has been introduced by the scientists, and it's called persistent organic pollutants. Now think of that term. The shortcut term for that is POPs. Persistent, which means that these things stay around in the environment. They're organic. Now that's not meaning organically grown food. That means organic in the way of being more of a living material, has carbon in it. So these things store within us, these polychlorinated biphenyls, these chlorinated compounds that are out there, and finding their way into our groundwater and making their way into our water and other things. So the reason why we care about these POPs is because we're seeing that POPs are associated with increased markers of inflammation. So people that have increased levels of POPs in their blood or come out in their urine tend to have greater amounts of inflammation. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, can I measure the amount of pollutants that are in my blood or in my urine? Yes, there are certain tests that you can get through a health professional to assess what you have in the way of these toxins. Now, are they the complete and get all the different toxins? No. There are tests to assess heavy metals in the body. There are tests to look at parabens and phthalates in the urine. So there are different tests, and you have to use really the knowledge of a healthcare practitioner to take you through those tests to see what would be appropriate for you. Now, keep in mind, I mentioned that these pollutants like to store in fat. So what does that mean? How is that relevant? Think about that for a second. Well, if you lose weight, and if you're a chronic dieter, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, what tends to happen is that you can get increased blood levels of these pollutants, they can increase. You actually liberate them. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't lose weight? No, it does not mean that. It means that some practitioners might say that a good detoxification using food and or dietary supplements or specialty products may help before one embarks on a weight loss program. So something to think about there, because as you start burning fat, you start releasing what's in that fat, and some of which could be these toxins. So you might have heard the term endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors, what does that mean? Endocrine refers to the endocrine glands of the body. We have the pituitary gland, we have the thyroid gland, we have the thymus, we have the ovaries, we have the adrenal glands, we have the testes. All of these aspects of the body are very fragile and sensitive to the presence of toxins. So what does that mean? Well, that means that hormone levels in the body can be impacted through these toxins. So if you're starting to notice that there are certain hormonal imbalances, toxins might be something to look at. Toxic metals. This is very prevalent. People are talking about metals. There's that we're really looking under the stones, turning all stones as it relates to the exposure to lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, and aluminum. You've heard about aluminum in deodorant type products, lead in paint, mercury in amalgams, and even methyl mercury in things like fish. Cadmium in batteries, which go into landfills and essentially work their way into the soil and into foods. Arsenic, I'm sure you heard of the scare about arsenic about 2 years ago, and it came from China, where they were seeing rice in rice paddies the rice was grown in arsenic-laden water, and so that rice became contaminated with arsenic because it made its way into the rice. So you can see that these toxic metals have a way of finding their way into the environment and really storing within our body and creating these disruptions. If you look here, again, back to cancer, why are we talking about toxins and disease as it relates to cancer for Harmony Hill? Well, there's so much here in the way of the different toxins that correlate to cancer incidence. Aluminum, arsenic, benzene, this whole list that you see to the far right have in some way or another, for stronger or for weaker, been associated in science or in some discussions with cancer. But you said it's not just cancer. We're starting everything from the A of attention deficit disorder, to allergies, to Alzheimer's, immune suppression, autism. Autism is a big one when it comes to heavy metals, especially mercury. Autoimmune diseases, blood pressure, and kidney disease. So, I don't think we would have thought about this 15 years ago. The ubiquitousness of all of these diseases and their correlation with heavy metals and other toxins. Here we have a number of other different conditions. Fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, relatively new diseases, if you will. It's been within the past 10 years that we started hearing more and more about them. And look at all the toxins that are associated with those conditions. To diabetes, it's definitely associated with these POPs, these different pesticides in our environment. And Dr. David Jacobs at the University of Minnesota has done a lot of great work on those. Fertility, menstrual disorders, so many increased rates of infertility throughout the world. They have anything to do with toxins? Well, perhaps. Multiple chemical sensitivity. People ask me time and time again, Deanna, why is it that so many people are getting more allergies? Why can't they tolerate certain foods? Why can't they eat gluten anymore? Why can't they have corn? Well, sure, there are a lot of answers to that, and I don't think we know the number one answer. But one thing that we can be thinking about is maybe it's not just the food. Maybe it's something that comes by way of the food, like these different substances that we're talking about. Now, keep in mind that another place where we store a lot of heavy metals is in the bone. In bone, we have calcium, we have lead typically. Lead stores in bone as well. So as we get older and we start to lose bone mineral density, we might see greater levels of some of these stored heavy metals that have accumulated within the bone. Now, the one system that is very sensitive to toxins outside of, well, all these systems are, many systems are very interrelated in the body, right? So it's really hard to pinpoint one. But there are some tissues that are more sensitive than others. One reproductive system, and I've already talked about fertility issues. Other one is the neurological system, the central nervous system, things like your nerves, things like your brain, your eyes, very, very sensitive to toxins, which is why we start to see some impact on the brain, behavioral issues. It all makes sense. All right, so lots of different symptoms to note whether or not we have a toxin overload, because people ask, they're thinking, well, gosh, I can't pay all that money to get my toxin levels tested, so what can I be looking for? What are the signs? What are the symptoms? Well, I want to look for some generalized muscle aches. Are you having difficulty concentrating? Do you have fatigue and you don't know where it comes from? I mentioned the food allergies or chemical sensitivities that are starting to increase. What is generalized pain in the body? No apparent cause. In your mood, irritability, headaches, no reason. Weakness in the body and pain anywhere with no apparent cause. You need to look at something like toxins. Get clean. Here's where we start to go into the different organs and talk about them. Now that I have a good sense of why, and hopefully I've given you enough information about that, why it's so important to pay attention to toxins. And people say all the time, they say, well, that's why we've got a good liver. That's why we have bowel movements. That's why we urinate, is to get rid of these things. Well, sure, and we hope that those systems are working well so that we are excreting. But not everybody has the same capacity in the liver. We've got different enzymes depending on our genes in our liver. We've got different capacity, functional capacity of our kidney, of our gut. Not all of us are having 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. Some of us are having irregular bowel movements, infrequent bowel movements, so we're not getting rid of a lot of those toxins. So our bodies are not really optimized in the way of getting rid of these toxins. And think skin. Skin is one of our largest organs, and we're not necessarily sweating through the skin. We're not getting a lot of activity, right? Not exercising. So skin is one of the ways to get toxins out as well. So let's start with the gut. The gut opinion is such an organ of release, and it's large, and it determines so much about our health. Much of our serotonin, or our brain chemical that makes us feel good, is in our gut. Most of our immune system is in our gut. If we have a very porous or leaky gut, it impacts so much. It can impact our immune system. We can have an autoimmune disease. We can have fatty liver, and liver dysfunction. So I'd really like to start with the gut, because when we take food in, it's going straight into the gut. So when I think of the gut, I think of the 5 R's. I think of removing the toxins, replacing what is missing in the gut to help with keeping a good, stable microflora, good bacteria, good secretions of acid and enzymes, re-inoculating with good, healthy bacteria, repairing the gut lining. The gut lining turns over every 3 to 5 days, a new gut lining. So the good thing is that every week you've got a nice new repaired lining. Now, if there's something more chronic and inflammatory, then you're not going to necessarily repair all of that. But at the very surface, those cells are turning over every 3 to 5 days. Looking at rebalancing, looking at levels of stress, and that could really impact elimination and getting rid of toxins. So let's talk about remove. When it comes to remove, What we typically think of is, what are we taking in? What we remove through our foods. So what you're going to see here, if you are looking at the slides, is I have a whole list. Typically what practitioners will do is they will put you on what's called an elimination diet. By the very nature of those words, elimination diet, we're eliminating, we're taking something out, we're excluding certain things to enable the body to see whether or not there's a reaction. We're making the body more sensitive to its potential food triggers. So on an elimination diet, what we're doing is we're taking out a lot of the allergens, a lot of the big 8, things like soy and corn and dairy and gluten and eggs. These are big allergens and typical allergens. Now, I'm not talking about sensitivities or intolerances. I'm talking about a full-blown allergic reaction. Typically, when I'm working with people, I'll put them on a list of foods that they need to eat. So things like certain fruits, vegetables, non-gluten greens. I'll have them eat legumes, nuts, and seeds unless they are sensitive to them that they know. Lean meat, if that's their choice to eat meat. And that also includes fish. But not necessarily, some practitioners are different. I do allow fish, but I don't allow shellfish. Shellfish is, again, one of those top allergens. You think of shrimp. There's definitely that potential for anaphylaxis or even a sensitivity. Certain healthy oils, of course, using dairy-related oils, beverages that don't have caffeine. So many times we need to just detox from caffeine. Our bodies are so ramped up on energy from caffeine, and caffeine changes the function of our liver enzymes. So our liver enzymes aren't working in a balanced way. We should be creating some disturbance in the liver with too much caffeine. Spices are great for a detox. I've done a whole webinar on spices for Harmony Hill. So if you're curious about spices, how to use them, make sure you go into that webinar. It's free and it's available through them. And now, typically what I like to do is to have patients refrain from eating lots of sugar. It's like we need a sugar detox, and sugar is in everything. It's in ketchup, it's in ready-to-eat cereal. It's in things that you wouldn't necessarily think that it's in, things like salad dressing, where you just don't anticipate having sugar, but it's there. So how do you keep the gut clean? How to get rid of what needs to be released? Well, the first things, and it's going to sound like it's very basic, but quite honestly, it's often overlooked, it's getting more water. And rule of thumb on water, and everybody's a little bit different in this, but the general rule of thumb is about half your body weight in ounces. So if I weigh 150 pounds, that's about 75 ounces of water. Now, if you are overweight or if you weigh more than 200 pounds, you don't want to be taking in too much water. So up to 100 ounces is more or less the threshold that has been set by various groups. What I also want to do is eat more fiber. Now, there are many types of fiber. The two classic types are the insoluble, and then there are types within that. The insoluble fiber we typically find in skins of fruits and vegetables, also the bran coating of whole grains. So what that does is it's almost like a broom, and it just works through us, and it sweeps debris through our intestine, and it helps us to get motility and move things out. Then there's another kind of fiber. There's soluble fiber, and soluble fiber is a bit more viscous. So you put this fiber in water, it expands. So this fiber is great, especially for people that have type 2 diabetes, because it slows the release of sugar into the bloodstream. It can trap a lot because it expands, it makes you feel full, and it traps. It acts like a big net carrying through anything that needs to be excreted. So ways to get fiber: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, flaxseed. Flaxseed meal is wonderful for this. When it comes to one of my favorite sources of fiber when it comes to fruit is blackberries. Blackberries, blackberries, I believe, is something on the order of about 8 grams of fiber with a pretty hefty dose. The average American gets about 11 to 15 grams of fiber a day, which is well under what we should be getting. It's about half of what we should be getting. We should get about 28 to 30 grams of fiber a day. So be with your food labels to see how much fiber you're getting. See if you can tally that up. And now, one of my favorite sources is legumes, beans, black beans, pinto beans, garbanzo beans. My goodness, you get a lot of fiber. If you have a serving of lentil soup, many times you're looking at about 11 grams of fiber in a serving. So that's about what one American gets a day, the whole day. So lots of different opportunities there. The thing is that you do want to avoid if you are sensitive to. And if you are interested in doing a detox and kind of going through this process, I'm going to be doing one in March where we really focus on week by week, how do we feel taking out these foods, and it is guided. So again, you do need some supervision when you do this. It is good to work with a practitioner who is skilled in the art. And emotionally, I think of letting go of that which needs letting go. You know, for every one of these organs, it's not just a physical cleansing. There might be an emotional cleansing as well. So when I think of the gut, I think of what are the things in our environment that we need to let go of. All right, so here is a little cheat sheet of good and excellent sources of fiber. A good source of fiber is 3 grams per serving. An excellent source of fiber is 5 grams or more. So you can see here, as I mentioned, lentils is just phenomenal. 1 cup of cooked lentils. You go to an Indian restaurant, that's called dal, D-A-L, right? Get about almost 16 grams of fiber in 1 serving, which is 1 cup of cooked black beans, 15 grams. Phenomenal. Now, those of you who might get bloated or not do well with beans, one that that works well is to rinse the beans well. Rinse them, especially if you get them out of a can, or cook them very well when you're making the soup, obviously. All right, so now another place to go if you want to have a sense of how much fiber food has, and you say, well, gosh, Deanna, that's a good list, but I want to know about other foods. There's this great website, and you can write it down. What you do is you just click on that search button right in the middle in purple. You type in the food, and then up will come the amount of fiber, the amount of calories, vitamins, minerals. You'll get lots of different nutrients that come up. So I'm just giving you this because it's probably more information than you need, but it's nice to know where is a credible source of nutrition information. This is definitely a great source. It's from the USDA. One of my favorite sites to go to is the world's healthiest foods, www.whfoods.org. I love this site. It does give you a lot of information about foods high in fiber. It'll talk about food preparation. Definitely, it's one of my go-to sites. Excellent. So how do we take in more clean food and drink? Well, what I have kind of opened up with, right? The idea of really becoming vigilant about the different foods that we're selecting in the market. So if we eat animal products, choosing free range, wild if it's fish, hormone-free, antibiotic-free animal products is going to be really key. The other thing is choosing organic versus conventionally grown produce. Yes, it's a little bit more money. In the end, you're getting more nutrients and you're not getting all of the pesticides and other toxins that are correlated. So your health is worth it. And many times we're really overlooking the power of those foods. Now, even if you buy organically grown food, I wouldn't say that that's a done deal and that you're 100% in the clear. What you still need to do is wash and scrub produce. If you can't scrub it, if it's something sensitive like berries, just washing it very well in light soapy water, making sure it's rinsed well is really key, because a lot of these pesticides and such are fat soluble. The only thing that's going to take that off is truly soap. We can't rinse it in water and hope for the best. Now, the other thing is to prepare food using stainless steel, quality cast iron, glass, or porcelain. Now, I didn't say an aluminum pot or a pan. So again, just trying to eliminate some of the heavy metals. And then buying food in glass rather than plastic. All those plastics that we have, whether it's plastic bottles, plastic containers that we heat our food up in, can create these endocrine disruptors that are very disruptive to, again, our endocrine glands and our hormones. Finally, filter your water at home. One of the things that I like is to put a filter actually on the water faucet. So for some people, they like the more portable water filtering type of systems, and that's fine too, but get your water tested at home. See what toxins you've got in it so that you know what kind of filter to get. Now, if you haven't seen Environmental Working Group site, they do, every couple of years, they put out the foods that are relatively clean and low in pesticides, and the foods that are a bit more what they call the dirty dozen. You definitely buy those organic. So worst, it comes up, time and time again, is really the berries. A lot of the berries are very contaminated with pesticides. So those are typically the ones that are advised to buy in the organic format. Now, if on the other side you say, well, gosh, do I have to buy everything organic? That would be so expensive. Well, save your money on certain fruits and vegetables that don't tend to be as contaminated. Think about the fruits and vegetables that have thicker skins, like avocado. You don't eat the skin of the avocado, so chances are you're going to have a better, if you can't afford the organic avocado, but have that you buy things with thicker skins in non-organic form. All right, what I did is I put on this list some various tips on how to reduce exposure to pesticides. If you think about it, as I mentioned with fat, translate, if fat in our body collects these pesticides, what do we think will happen with animal products? Well, same thing. We're going to find that animal fats are going to harbor the most amount of these valuable pesticides. So think about that with all the fatty animal products that you might be eating. I already mentioned buying organically grown produce. Try local produce in season. Peel off the skin or removing the outer layer of leaves of some products. Like if you buy a head of lettuce, and it's in its contained form, what you can do is peel off some of the outer leaves so that you're reducing your exposure that way. You might want to remove, as I mentioned, those surface pesticide residues, waxes that you find on apples, the fungicides and fertilizers, by just soaking the food or just scrubbing a bit with a nice vegetable scrub can work very well. And also, don't forget to wash your hands before you even start cleaning the vegetables and after. Because we handle this stuff at the grocery store, and then we take it home, and we're not thinking about all of the what might be collecting on our hands, and then we go and touch our face or touch our mouth, and there be some levels of ingestion there perhaps. And take away any damaged or bruised areas before you prepare or eat fruits and vegetables. And you want to wash the produce before you peel it, right? You don't want to peel off your lettuce leaves and then wash it. You want to wash it. Even orange. Even though you're not eating the peel of an orange, what I typically do is I wash it, because an orange peel is very porous. And so as I'm peeling that orange, I am going to come into contact with the peel, and I'm going to be touching the flesh and eating that flesh of the fruit. And so I just want to be sure that I'm not taking any contaminants in that way. You mentioned the clean vegetable brush, and that's if you've got more durable things like potatoes and melons and cucumbers, so you can really scrub that off. And then dry the produce with a clean cloth or paper towel, excuse me, to reduce bacteria that may be present. Oh, scrub brush. So here's what one looks like. Expensive, and you can find them at grocery stores. And what I would say is, you have to dispose of them every, I would say, couple of months, because in mind that it's going to start collecting. It's just like you don't hang on to the same dishwashing sponge forever. You clean them or you toss them and use new ones. So same thing with this brush. I feel the need to talk a little bit about fish because many times we're told to eat fish. It's a healthy food. And there are some foods within fish, some types of fish that are higher in methyl mercury. And I took this information from the Environmental Working Group site. So here are some of the fish that tend to be higher in mercury, things like shark and swordfish and mackerel, tilefish, tuna steak. Now that's a popular one if you go out having a tuna steak. Very dense, has the fat that holds in the mercury. It's also mercury finds its way into the actual tissue. It's not just the fat. Halibut, which is a common one, walleye, and bass, some of the fish on here. So now you're probably thinking, well, tell me what is lowest in mercury so I eat those fish. Well, lots of choices there. Salmon, especially wild Pacific salmon, trout, shrimp. You want to look for wild shrimp, I tend to get, rather than the farm shrimp, and some specific other types of fish here. All right, move on to the liver, away from the gut and into the liver. The liver, why do I have camouflage pants and boots here? Well, liver in Chinese medicine is often referred to as the general. The general gets everybody together, sends the command, and that's what the liver does to a lot of the body. There is essentially 3 steps for the liver to that it makes its directive in. It first takes the toxin and it makes it takes it from being fat soluble and fat loving, and it makes it water soluble. The next thing it does is it takes the water soluble toxin and couples it with some kind of count so that the body can get rid of it, because the body can't just, it needs to make it very easy to excrete. And finally, what happens is that compound is excreted in either the bile, which goes out into the intestine, the stool, or the urine. The way I think about it is it's almost like your house. Think of your house like you. And you might have little garbage cans in each of the rooms, like the bathroom or the office or the kitchen. And so what you do is you collect all that garbage, and that's kind of the first process of the liver. The liver collects all the garbage, get together, and then you need to take it out of the house, because otherwise all that garbage can start to smell. It's not good to have in the house. Things start rotting. So you need to eliminate it, and that's really what the liver is good at. Now, this is a pretty convoluted pathway process here, right? But see the complexity of what's going on in the liver, and essentially the way that scientists think of this is that it goes through phases. And in the first phase, we make that toxin more water soluble, and you're going to see there is that lots of nutrients to do that. So people do fast, and that in a way of cleansing. There's some debate about that, because in order to get things out of the body, you can see it's a nutrient-requiring process. You need things for the first phase. You need things to couple to that toxin to get it out of the body. So you need good nutrition. You need good protein, you need vitamins, and you need a lot of antioxidants. Keep that in mind. You want good sources of B vitamins in your eating when you're doing a detoxification. You need protein, and if you're eating enough plants, you're getting a lot of the protective compounds that can support the liver as it's making its way through this process. So cruciferous vegetables are great sources of a lot of these different compounds. Last phase, protein is definitely required. So good sources of protein to couple to that toxin and then carry it out of the body. So kind of nice. So you can see here at the end, body's free to get rid of these things, as I mentioned, either through the bile, which will go through the stool, or to the blood, which will then make its way into the urine. It's kind of how the body is just so streamlined in really disposing of these substances. So liver is important. You want to make sure it gets adequate nutrients so that it can do its job. You want to, some foods that help the detoxification process in the liver. Here are some of my favorites. Tea. Green tea is good for so many things. In fact, I remember seeing one study that showed that 1 cup of green tea reduced the risk of breast cancer by 51%. Just 1 cup of green tea a day. Wow. You know, so many benefits of green tea. A lot of the catechins in green tea help with blood sugar control. So fabulous, fabulous. It helps with both phases in the liver. So it's not just focused on one phase. Pomegranate. How do you like pomegranate seeds? Well, it's not a very common food, but there's a pomegranate juice out there, pomegranate fruit. Very good for the liver. It contains a substance called ellagic acid that helps with the liver detox. Cruciferous vegetables, I already mentioned them. They're one of my favorites. Citrus fruits. So things like, I'm sure you've heard of lemon. People are doing cleanses or detoxes. Oftentimes you hear, well, have some lemon water. What lemon water does, what the lemon is doing is it's actually helping the liver. A lot of those compounds in citrus are helping with these liver processes. So that's a good thing. Watercress. Watercress is a great fresh green that you can make a salad out of. You can make soup. You can add to a variety of different things. Stir-fries. It's a little bit pungent and it's a little bitter. It would have some medicinal properties as well. Turmeric is great. Gosh, great anti-inflammatory, and it helps with detox. It has so many different actions. I feel like I talk about it every time I'm giving a talk. You can't go wrong with turmeric. Beet, another great one. And it's not just the beet, the red beet, it's also the beet greens. Don't forget that. If you smoothies, make sure you take those beet greens. Don't waste them. Chop up, and you can make a smoothie of those as well. And again, be a little bit more bitter. Now, what do I think about? With the gut, I think about letting go on the emotional level. For the liver is associated with the emotion of anger. I have noticed when people go through a detox is a lot of emotions come up. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes sadness, sometimes they start cleaning their house, they start getting rid of clutter, they start thinking about people that they are involved with and relationships in their lives, and it can really be a transformative process. So when I think of the liver, I think of anger and all of that stored anger. So super foods for the liver, I've already mentioned them, the turmeric and the green tea. And for those that are working with a practitioner, there is an herb called milk thistle that is wonderful for helping to support the liver, both sides of those processes. So you can see whether or not that would be warranted based on what your practitioner says. One of my favorite things to do, whether I'm doing a detox or not, is make my own spa. I call it spa water because you have to drink water, right? And that's kind of, keeps you functioning, gives you energy. And so what you can do is you can cut up lemon slices or take an orange rind, one that has been washed well, or strawberry slices, kiwi slices, and put them in water and just let it sit. And you get the essence of those fruits infused into the water, and it tastes so good, and it's doing something as well medicinally. So I always like when something works on both sides, where it tastes good and it's really healthy too. The longer that you let your green tea steep where it becomes very bitter, better, because they're releasing more of those catechins that help with things like blood sugar and detoxification. I had already mentioned the cruciferous vegetables. Cruciferous is not just broccoli. I know broccoli gets the limelight, but there are a lot of them. Dr. Land and I wrote this article about specific compounds in cruciferous vegetables that are helping with detox, and not just detox, but also hormones. That we can really help our hormone levels and change the metabolism of them in the body to the liver through these cruciferous vegetables. So I thought I could help by giving you a list of all the many cruciferous vegetables. And you can see it doesn't stop with broccoli. In fact, there are so many, bok choy. And try what you've not tried before. You want to try, like, one thing I've been experimenting with are more of the teeny tiny broccolini and some of the more Chinese cabbages. And you have to go to specialty stores sometimes, or larger stores that have more ethnic foods. But they're really interesting, and they have really nice tastes. My latest thing, too, is also microgreens. And at Harmony Hill, they're going to be growing these microgreens. And so microgreens are things like we take the seeds of these greens, and then you grow them for 7 days, and you eat them. They're these little leaflets, and they're very, very nutrient dense. So typically what we do is we let the spinach grow big and wide. We let kale grow long. But if we stop them growing when they're smaller, they're more dense with those nutrients. So that might be something you want to try. I love collard greens, also a cruciferous vegetable. And what I like about them is that when people do a cleanse, they're not always using things like tortillas and breads. And so we have to find substitutes. And one of the fun things to do is to make a wrap using collard greens, a leaf of a collard green. It's surprising how dull it is and how much you can put in there. Of course, there are so many types of kale. Now, keep in mind that kale is on the dirty dozen list. Kale tends to be contaminated with pesticides. So this is one you might want to think about when it comes to buying organic. That bok choy, I love bok choy for stir fries. Put in carrots and radishes and cabbage. Bok choy makes a really nice complement. Hamatsuna, this is a type of an Asian green, which you can't find it so readily, I would say, but more in the ethnic grocery stores. Arugula is ubiquitous. It's a great bitter green that you can make as a salad. It's watercress, and again, you can make watercress tea even. Add watercress. These are the tiny leaflets, right? Again, very dense in nutrients. Radishes. Even the green of the radish as well as the colored part. This is a cruciferous. Daikon radish. When was the last time you had one of those, right? And how wonderful these can be. Mustard seeds. I like to put mustard seeds, and mustard seeds are great. They do belong in the cruciferous family. And what I'll do is I'll sprinkle them sometimes on a stir fry. And lots of flavor. They're very pungent, though, so just, you don't want to take a spoonful of these. Beets. I talked about beets. Beets are really great because they contain natural substances that open up your blood vessels. So beets are really good for the heart, too, not just the liver. Turmeric. My favorite recipes, I just have to tell you this. I just made it this past weekend. I call it turmeric squares. Down some coconut oil, and then add in turmeric, a lot of turmeric. So 1 cup of coconut oil, melt it down. Then I put in half a cup of turmeric powder, and then put in some, I ground some black pepper, because black pepper and turmeric just stick together. They work well together, and black pepper potentiates the effects of turmeric. So I put that, just a lid in there, and then 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. I stir it up. I put it into a glass dish, so it's just a very thin layer, and I let it cool, and then I cut them up into squares. And I've brought them now to 2 different social gatherings, and it's amazing how people just really take to these turmeric squares. I would have never thought they would have liked them, but people seem to like them. It's interesting because they're not absolutely sweet, and they're not savory. There's something in between, so very intriguing, and they have a great mouth feel. So what's neat about turmeric is that turmeric contains a substance called curcumin. And curcumin, according to this study, seems to protect against mercury exposure, which is heavy metal. Let's move into the kidney. Hopefully you got a lot there on the liver. There's a lot you can do. So your takeaways there are cruciferous, green tea, pomegranate, and really to sample from the different cruciferous vegetables. Kidney. So in Chinese medicine is known as the philosopher thinker. And so with kidney, what does not help our kidney is when we eat lots of animal products and lots of fried foods. This changes what we call the dietary acid load. We increase the amount of acid in the body. It makes our kidneys, and in fact, it taps into our bones, and it extracts base and alkaline material from our bones so that the kidney can excrete. So we keep the kidneys clear. Well, what we already talked about for the gut is drink adequate water and eat foods that are more alkalizing, that help and aren't very acid. So things like cruciferous vegetables and other non-starchy vegetables. And I think of the kidneys in Chinese medicine, we're really focused on fear. So fear, if we turn it into action, can be a motivator, right, rather than attaching to it and thinking about it. So one of the things that can come up, too, when you do a detox is this whole idea of fear. Lungs, breath. Did you think that the air that you're taking in can be toxic as much as detoxifying? And I mentioned to you that there is, it's not just the outdoor air, but believe it or not, indoor air can be full of pollutants. Things like ozone gases, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, passive smoke. So we're breathing this in, and again, another way that it's insidious that we're getting these toxins. So many of us are shallow breathers. We're breathing from the top of our chest up, and so what we get is a lot of residual particles and a lot of really, non-nourished space in the lower part of our lungs. So breathing in deeply can be very powerful, can be very therapeutic for releasing and getting rid of a lot of toxins that might be stored in the lung. One of the things that I think about would be the fumes that come from household products. So what you want to do is, if you can choose unscented at any level, whether it's a personal care product or it's a household cleaning product, that's really going to be better. So aim for chemical-free products rather than those synthetic ones. You can even make your own. Reduce chlorine exposure. You breathe in chlorine when you're under the shower head. And there are specific filters that are filtering out some of that chlorine. So you can look into that as well. And then, of course, avoiding a lot of those personal care products that are stinky, smelly, not so good for the lungs, and filled with a number of different endocrine disruptors. All right. So deep breathing is going to be key. One of the things I like to do is what's called the 4 square breaths. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, releasing for 4, hold for 4. You can almost draw that like a square, right? You can do it when you're driving. You can do it all the time. You can do it while you're listening to me. Watching for the fumes of products. Exercising in good quality air. It's always remarkable to me when I see people jogging next to a busy road. I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, here they are taking in lots of air, breathing in a lot, and they're breathing in a lot of those exhaust fumes. So be aware of that. If we think of the lungs, the symbolism and the emotion that goes along with it is grief. So the importance of tears. And I don't know this, but we release inflammatory cytokines in our tears. Our body's inflammation compounds get released. So it's a good thing to cry, and lots of medicine there. Rest for last, talking about the skin, all the personal care products that we are getting on a daily basis, men as well as women. I already mentioned to you all the different chemicals that we're getting and all of these different products. lipstick, the darker the red, what we tend to see that a lot of these cream red lipstick tend to have greater levels of lead. So keep that in mind. What about antimicrobial soaps and a lot of the soaps out there? We're using a lot of them, and there are questions about that, and also about the chemicals that are used in those products, like triclosan. They are so good. Salts, if they're indicated for you, it's a great way to get rid of some toxins through your sweat. I personally have an infrared sauna. It's one of the best investments I've ever made, especially when you live in the Pacific Northwest when it's really damp outside. It's a great way to get dry, get warm, and sweat, and burn some calories while you're at it. Keeping the skin clear. Reading the labels of personal care products to minimize their use. And I did a personal care product webinar for Harmony Hill. If you're interested in knowing more about that, I get a lot of information in that webinar. Please check into their library. Avoid aluminum-containing deodorant. Actually, if you have physical activity, that's going to be really helpful. An indicator of a good workout is my sweat. If I don't sweat, I'm not happy. I don't feel like I did enough. Sauna use, if appropriate. There are some contraindications of using a sauna. If you have high blood pressure, if you're pregnant, and other kinds of cardiovascular type of issues. Brushing, buying a brush, and actually stimulating the lymph, getting especially your armpits, your groin, low back, certain areas just to really facilitate the circulation and get things moving. Now, what is the emotion that skin connects to? About embracing the self and self-acceptance. Are we comfortable in our skin? Let me summarize for you. I hope that you're not fearful, but now armed with information about toxins and what you can do with all of these different organs that you have and re-optimize them. Think for yourself, what are your top 3 takeaways here? What do I want to put into action? I mentioned that I'm personally, through Food and Spirit, doing a cleanse in March. If you're interested, please go to the Food and Spirit website, drop us an email, let us know that you'd like to do that. It's going to be a 20-day cleanse. And don't forget the virtual Detox Summit. Free, lots of information. Why would you sign up? You can always get the recordings and listen to it later. And you're not just listening to me, you're listening to 30 different experts talk with you about toxins and detox. So I'm going to leave you there. I hope that you've enjoyed this and found it informative. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to take those as well. I do see a question here. On some elimination diets, and Patricia, thank you for this question. It's very good. On some elimination diets, there are certain requirements about certain things that you should eat and certain things that you don't eat. On one in particular that I used to use in a particular clinic, pork was taken off of there. And really and truly, I think that was more about the fat content of pork and the poor quality, not really having good source of pork, farmed pork versus, more of the free range sources of pork. So I think that it was made that in the way of looking at fat content and also looking at how pigs are raised and whether or not that was a good way of, are getting in too many toxins that way or not. Okay, and Kelly has a question about, she says, what are your thoughts on detoxing through juicing? Well, I'm kind of mixed, Kelly, and what I would say about that is I like the form of juicing where you use a blender or a pulverizer. So something like a Blendtec, Vitamix, NutriBullet. I have no attachment to the brand. But when we actually grind up the whole food rather than just take the juice. have noticed when people do juices is that it can tend to spike their blood sugar, which is not a good thing. But when they have the whole fruit or the whole vegetable, which includes the skin and the flesh of the fruit, you get more of a blunting of that effect. You get some fiber. So I like that very much. So I do tend to bring those into my cleanses when I'm doing those with folks. I do talk about smoothies, necessarily juicing, but talking about smoothies. So yes, that's a really good strategy. Any questions? Wonderful. All right, well, thank you all so much for being on the call tonight. Really a pleasure. And don't forget to check back. Harmony Hill offers numerous free webinars, and so you can sign up in advance and let us know that you're interested. And we do have a limit on the number of people that can attend, so you may want to sign up in advance just to ensure that you get your place. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.